Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick, and there's still a Ravens opponent this week coming up, even after the Armageddon the Ravens faced in that Kansas City game. And we have a special guest today. Joining me to talk about the Houston Texans is my college friend, Charlie Pallilo. We did a show for 1 year together, and it's now been, how long has it been?
15 years, Ken.
Right.
Times 2 plus another 10 or 11.
That would be good. Yeah, that would be good. So it's 1985-ish that we did this show, 85, 86 kind of period. So it's been quite a long time anyway. But Charlie, good friend, we stayed in touch a little bit over the years, not as much as we should have, but he's gravitated to Houston sports, where he's become, I've just heard, I knew this before, a Houston sports legend in terms of his radio presence there. He is the probably considered in a lot of ways the most senior and level-headed guy about Houston sports, and always had a kind of a trick, a chicanerous quality about him, even back in the day, of having a very surface level knowledge of an unbelievable number of sports, which he can evacuate very quickly to you. That is it always impressed me greatly, Charlie.
I blush.
All right, let's talk about the Houston Texans if we can. Now, they are coming to town. They're hitting the Ravens at exactly the right time. This has rarely been the case for the Texans, and particularly in recent years. They've come at exactly the wrong time to face the Ravens. But they come off a shutout themselves this last week.
Yeah, well, historically, pretty much any time facing the Ravens has been the wrong time for the Texans. And of course, most recently, the Christmas Day annihilation, 31-2. So yeah, the Texans have that sort of motivation, but they're a mess also. So this is the movable object, resistible force matchup. Obviously, Lamar Jackson's status tips things. I mean, what world are we in that the Houston Texans are favored at the Baltimore Ravens? I mean, the Texans are 1-3 and they've played to it. The Ravens are about 2 more defensive injuries from having you suit up, Ken?
Yeah, pretty much.
The Texans offense has just been a disaster so far. 1 touchdown in the first 3 games on average. And then against the woebegone Titans, a 6-0 classic at halftime on Sunday before the Titans tightened and the Texans turned it into a 26-0 rout. But yeah, both these teams are dangerously close to circling the drain. Of course, the Ravens, it would seem, are in the much tougher AFC North, but the Bengals are racing to the bottom post-Burrow. The Browns are the Browns, so that leaves the Steelers. So even at 1-3, it's not like the Ravens are fading to oblivion. Meanwhile, the Texans, in what has been the marshmallow AFC South that they've won the last 2 years, you have the Colts and the Jaguars at 3-1, and the Texans already have a loss to the Jaguars. So the loser Sunday won't be dead, but you can start browsing coffins, perhaps 1-4 and a head-to-head tiebreaker situation, a conference loss. So who'd have thunk it from the Baltimore side, but truly from the Houston side also. I mean, the Texans haven't been a serious contender the last 2 seasons, but back-to-back seasons as a 10-7 division champ, aiming higher in 2025. Well, they need to recalibrate their aim, perhaps.
All right. Well, very, very proper inflection there for the Jaguars, who are, have our team that is surprising right now. In the AFC North, honestly, I think the Browns have established themselves as legitimate contenders. A lot of the money seems to be shifting there in terms of the futures bets on that. By the way, one of the worst bets you can make right now is a futures bet on anything, given prospective tax law in 2026. I'll repeat that and point you back to an old podcast of mine. But let's talk about the offseason for the Texans. Big pickups. Who did they get in the draft? Talk a little bit.
Well, it was an offensively driven offseason, starting with firing their offensive coordinator, Bobby Slowick, who had a bad second season after what was thought to be a very promising first season. He's getting head coach interviews. And then they sprinted backwards last year, and so he was the fall guy. They bring in Nick Caley, part of the Sean McVay operation with the Rams. Now, he's never been a coordinator before, and so for the second time, C.J. Stroud's playing quarterback for an offensive coordinator who's never worn the pants offensively. which probably creates its own problems. But their offensive turnover started at the coordinator position. The ongoing issue for years has been the offensive line. And Nick Caserio, who's their president of football operations, general manager, did a pretty good job of roster building in what is now his 5th season as the shot caller for the Texans, with the egregious, glaring, pathetically inept exception of the offensive line. He hasn't been neglectful. He's just been wretchedly incompetent. The last 4 drafts, the Texans have used a first rounder, a second rounder, a second rounder, a second rounder on offensive linemen. The first of those 4, Kenyon Green, a complete bust, gave him away in a trade over the summer to the Eagles. He didn't even make the Eagles.
He just signed
first, second
with
round
the Ravens practice squad.
Yeah, there you go. I wouldn't try to pump him for information. Aptitude was not considered one of his strengths either, along with pass blocking and run blocking. Juice Scruggs, second rounder. Hey, he's going to be their starting center. Now he sometimes gets to rotate because the guy they signed in the offseason, Jay Andrews, to be their starter, has been A, mediocre, B, banged up. Year 3, Blake Fisher, second round pick out of Notre Dame. They're scared to have him on the field. He may get every third series snaps at most. This year, Ariante Ursary, they have him as their starting left tackle, if not quite a turnstile. He's been getting beaten fairly often, and of course, they needed a left tackle because they traded away their best offensive lineman, Laramie Tunsil, who had a bloated contract, wanted a contract extension, was not a good run blocker, good pass blocker, also led the league in penalties. So they did an overhaul on the offensive lineman. They signed mediocre free agents, a guy named Laken Tomlinson, journeyman from Detroit, Ed Ingram, who'd never really done anything with the Chargers, Cam Robinson, they gave over $10 million. They just traded him for nothing last week to the Browns. So a much longer story that I just gave Ken short. The offensive line remains a mess.
Okay, so that's we're jumping a little bit ahead, but is any other acquisitions during the offseason that the Ravens need to be aware of? I'm not seeing a lot of playing time from the draft picks themselves this year. So Jaden Higgins, a wide receiver that I liked in the draft, has got 5 catches so far, it looks like. And Ursary you've mentioned some things. I'm very patient with offensive linemen. I think he's more than likely to come around. Who else they have that's seen time? Woody Marks. Tell me about him.
Scat back type, who for the first time in the win over the Titans became the lead back. 17 carries, good pass catcher out of the backfield, has some shiftiness. You're not going to be a star level back. 4th rounder out of USC, the 3rd so-called skilled position offensive player they took in the draft back in the spring. You mentioned Higgins. They also took Jalen Knoll, Higgins' teammate, at Iowa State. Maybe it's the Big 12 the Texans are hoping to win, not the AFC South. Knoll also a factor in the kick return game for them. But in terms of offensively, Woody made the first notable imprint in the win over the Titans. And they signed Nick Chubb as a number 2 back. What does he have left after his major injuries? Barely 3 yards per carry. I know it was with the Browns, but not much last season. Well, already he's having time usurped. And these other guys are in the mix, Chubb and Marks, because Joe Mixon, who had a very good first season with the Texans, he has a foot problem. There's a chance, from what I understand, he will not play at all this season.
Wow. Okay, so that's a lot. Let's go back to Stroud now for a minute. Obviously, a good year. And it's now been 2 years, right, since his rookie year. 23 was his rookie year, right?
Correct.
And a fine year that year, got him to the playoffs, and he had 2 tough games against the Ravens, but certainly a hell of a good looking quarterback. And then last year seemed like really was antsy behind that offensive line.
No doubt. I mean, from Stroud's perspective, it was probably 1,000 duck, or 1,000 to run. Hit a lot. Only Caleb Williams, rookie quarterback behind an atrocious Bears offensive line was sacked and hit more last season. The Texans, their football playing origin, number 1 pick in the draft, David Carr, and it's a simplification. that they ruined him with lousy offensive lines, that you start seeing both real rushers and phantom rushers, and your feel in the pocket suffers. There definitely seems to have been an element of that with Stroud, who also was fundamentally less accurate last season. And the randomization to an extent of turnovers in the NFL, that as a rookie, I mean, he was historic in his production in several ways. 23 touchdowns to just 5 interceptions. That, okay, progress is linear straight to wherever you're going to max out. He's starting at a 4.8 to 1 touchdown to interception ratio. What's he going to do now? Well, he regressed. And so far this season, through an interception each of the first 3 games, it's just not been a good offense by any measure. And CJ Stroud is entering the window where his representation is going to be saying, hey, $60 million per year in the ever escalating cap era of the NFL. How's that sound, Texans? Well,
somebody will pay.
Season remains, but he does not warrant going into the stupid $50-55 million range that teams idiotically knee-jerk seemingly go to. Trevor Lawrence, I'd already be selling Brock Purdy stock on his being worth $50 million. For your Jacksons, for your Josh Allens. I guess so far this season, Justin Herbert's looking like a decent investment at that level. But CJ Stroud is an absolute mid-tier quarterback at this point. For the Texans to be pouring a $250 million or more into him after this season, a lot rides on these next 3 months.
So I want to go back to David Carr for a second, because it's still one of the most hilarious things ESPN, I think it was ESPN, ever did.
Oh, yeah.
You describe it because you'll do a better job than me.
Yeah, it was a joke. Mm-hmm. Carr was sacked 72 times or some preposterous number his rookie season. And in one of ESPN's NFL promo commercial spots, they CGI'd that David Carr was taking a snap and dropping back, and they'd removed all the offensive linemen. That's the spot you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So it was David Carr just running around with no one protecting him, which was certainly figurative, but quite often damn near literal.
Yeah, it was a promo for the draft. It's like, what does your team need? And Carr has a wide receiver and a running back himself in the center, and he's
spoiler alert, offensive lineman. And here we are 22 years later, and it's still their primary need offensively.
All right. So at the skill position players, other than running back, tight ends, wide receivers, who do the Texans feature?
Nico Collins is an absolute stud. Numbers down this season because the offense has just been a stink bomb. But he was all pro level, non-Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase division last year. Missed 5 games with a hamstring injury, so that pulled down the counting stats. But he's a home run hitter. They run screens and slants with him. The best talent that they have on the offensive side of the ball, so get it in his hands as often as you can. After him, it's the 2 rookies, and then just filler guys. Dalton Schultz is an okay pass-catching tight end, but he scares exactly nobody. So it's load up on Nico, because I know the Ravens secondary is banged up, but Nico Collins is a better wide receiver than any healthy Raven cornerback, Humphrey or other.
Right. And Wiggins is out. Humphrey is out. So, it's a tough spot for the Ravens, certainly. Excuse me 1 second here. Just love when that happens during the show. But anyway, getting back, let's flip it over to the defensive side here and hear a little bit about that unit, which we, are aware that they have one of the highest pass rush win rates from the edge. So maybe we start there.
There is no better pass rushing tandem than what the Texans have in Will Anderson, 3rd pick in the draft, 3rd season now out of Alabama. Double-digit sack guy. If he has a healthy 17 games, probably Pro Bowl guy. On the other side, straight-up Pro Bowl guy. Danielle Hunter, sack per game to this stage in the career, he is playing at a Hall of Fame level. They gave him a $36 million 1-year extension for next year and a big raise for this year to bump him up to the going rate of elite pass rushers. TJ Watt wasn't a better pass rusher last year than Danielle Hunter. Aiden Hutchinson wasn't before he broke his leg. So with the Ravens, I know they got decent fill-in play for Stanley at left tackle, but it's a big edge for the Texans with Hunter and Anderson. You can't double team both of them. Who's the third guy that they bring? They don't have a special linebacker. They have more plugger guys, rotation in the defensive interior. But in this era, if you can start defensively with two hellacious pass rushers and one so-called shutdown corner, the Texans have that framework. Derek Stingley Jr. conservatively is a top 5 cover corner in the league. Suffered a little oblique injury a couple weeks ago, but played Sunday against the Titans. And so he's no doubt CB1 here and would be on most teams.
Okay, fair enough. How does the defensive interior look? This seems to me to be a game where the Ravens are going to want to minimize what's happening from the edge rushers and try and get the running game going again. Don't know if they can without Jackson, but how does the defensive interior look?
Yeah, no standout players. They play 5-6 defensive tackles during the course of the game. They brought back Sheldon Rankins, who'd been here, went to Cincinnati for a year. Tommy Togiai made some tackle for loss type plays that you'd say, who's Tommy Togiai? It's more guys like that. There's no Vita Vea type that the Ravens need to be thinking, geez, this guy's going to collapse the pocket from the interior, and we have to worry about the guys on the outside. Both Hunter and Anderson try to get up the field. So if there's opportunity to exploit them in the screen game, perhaps. But the strength is the edge guys. The secondary's pretty solid. Kamari Lassiter was another second-round pick last year. He starts opposite Stingley. Caleb Bullock, third-round safety out of USC a year ago. Jalen Petrie, a third-round pick a couple years before that out of Baylor. It's a solid, pretty athletic secondary. Linebacker core is no better than average, but it's Hunter, Anderson, and that pass rush. And if the Ravens have to play from behind, especially without Lamar Jackson, their offense is in trouble Sunday.
Right. Well, we'd agree with that. I mean, maybe even with Lamar Jackson, but C.J. Gardner-Johnson got released a couple of weeks ago. Can you give us a little insight into that? There was certainly talk in Baltimore where an additional safety would be potentially a help that could unlock some of the value of Kyle Hamilton by allowing him to move closer to the line of scrimmage. What was the issue?
How can I put this delicately? Played dumb. He runs his mouth a lot, and he wasn't covering the checks that his mouth was writing. Specific breakdowns involving big plays where he was in the wrong spot on the field. And I forget the exact saying, but you can only coach stupid up so much. If you get beat physically, unless you're just so untalented, hey, we got to get this guy off the field. But repeated mental errors, coaches aren't going to put up with that. They got Gardner-Johnson from the Eagles in the Kenyon Green trade, right? The Eagles were just offloading salary there. And so the Texans are going to eat $8 million in dead money for a guy they traded for and then cut 3 weeks into the season, splitting it up over this year and next. But the thinking was, right, the base defense in the NFL these days is pretty much 4-2-5. And so the Texans thought Gardner-Johnson, in addition to the 4 guys who I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, hey, there was their base / nickel package. Well, they're down 1/5 of that now.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. That's a tough place to be. In terms of how it's really hard to say how they defend the Ravens' skill position weapons, because without the quarterback, they don't mean a damn thing. But is there anything that you expect them to do with, say, Zay Flowers to try and defend him? Do they travel with Stingley to cover, a particular receiver, or does he stay always at one side of the field?
Not consistently. You'd think with a superstar corner who they gave a $30 million per season extension that you'd say, okay, if you're facing Chase or Jefferson or CeeDee Lamb or anyone with a clear number one, you are latched on to him. But they don't play it that way full time. And certainly Flowers, good young player, but not at the level that I think the Texans would say, okay, priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, Sting, you're on Flowers, rub him out of the game plan.
Mm-hmm. All right. I mean, he has not been a guy who's been consistently going deep to beat teams, but there is no one in the league who can cover him on a crossing route. There's just no one in the league who can do it. So sometimes, in some ways, it wouldn't matter if you put your best corner on him or not. But without Jackson, I think that's going to be a frustrating absence from the Ravens offense. So we'll see how that goes. Ravens have played a lot lighter these last. This last game was the lightest the Ravens had played since before the Greg Roman era, and I'm talking about even as a tight end or run game coordinator. So you have to go back at least a decade to find the last time the Ravens played as light in terms of tight ends plus fullbacks on the field, and that's been a big difference. Are the Texans particularly suited or particularly vulnerable to a team that wants to play heavier and either put in a sixth offensive lineman or put in two tight ends consistently?
In terms of they could be run on last year, so they wanted to fortify at least in numbers in the interior. They played at the Rams, who didn't gash them, and then lost to the Bucs here, at the Jaguars. They haven't faced a team with a real prominent running game yet, and certainly not a quarterback threat runner established. Cam Ward's done nothing yet in the league. But I guess it's a general thought and way to slow down a pass rush. If you can run at it, exploit the pass rushers or beat them up the middle inside. But they have not been notably soft so far. I mean, look, the Texans are 1-3, except, and it's a gigantic except, they gave up an 80-yard game-winning drive to the Buccaneers to lose the Monday night game. They lost to the Rams 14-9. They gave up 20 points to the Buccaneers, 17 points, 19 points to the Jaguars, and shut out the Titans. A healthy Ravens offense. The Buccaneers offense is pretty good overall. You'd say, okay, throw out the numbers. They haven't defended this attack yet. But if it's Cooper and not Lamar, I just think the Texans defense is clearly better than the Ravens offense.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I think most people in Baltimore would agree at this point. It's a dark time here. And the gambling public does not seem to have latched onto this yet. They still had the Ravens favored over the Chiefs in Kansas City going into a game. And I mean, even going into the game, they had a bunch of injuries and then they picked up 5 new ones. And it just so happens, I don't know how this seems to happen so regularly, but the Ravens do have a lot of stars at a lot of positions. It's 5-star players. It's not 5 even just starters. They lose Ronnie Stanley. They lose Lamar Jackson. They lose Wiggins, who's their best young corner. They use Humphrey. Just an awful, awful day. They used
Matabuke has eaten the Texans' lunch inside the last couple of years too.
Yeah, that's such a sad story, Charlie. I mean, you hear Harbaugh talk about it, and the syntax he uses is exactly the same he uses for discussing any retiring player. He basically says, with regard to, he's out for the rest of the season, but beyond that, I'm going to let him talk to you about that. And that's exactly the words he uses. And that is not the syntax you want. That's a guy who's getting multiple opinions to see if there's a way he could stay in the league, maybe. But it's so sad in terms of just his own personal situation. Obviously, it's a disaster for the Ravens cap. They just spent a ton of money and have 3 years left on his contract, including this. And it's horrible for that. But the personal loss for Matabike and his own identity really going down very quickly is sad as hell. Yeah. All right. So I always ask every guest if you pick a player on each side of the ball you think matches up particularly well against the Ravens.
Nico Collins is almost a default answer offensively because A, he's outstanding. B, what else is there? But this is not a case of, if you're the, can I say this? If you're the tallest midget in the room, it doesn't mean you're a giant. If you're the tallest little person in the room, and I'm short, I can crack short jokes, Ken. You recall, I've not had a growth spurt over the last 40 years. Nico Collins is a stud. Can they get him the ball enough? Can they protect Stroud enough to get Collins downfield? Defensively, I'll go with Stingley since he's the clear standout DB, and you talked about Flowers crossing routes, I guess, flip the coin, same question. Will the Ravens be able to protect to let Flowers get across the field? And while he may be fast enough to pull away eventually, he's not going to leave Stingley in his dust. Stingley is good. And also wide receiver hands. He plays the ball phenomenally. The issue with Stingley coming out of LSU in his first 2 seasons with the Texans, durability, injury factors. Last season, he aced the attendance grade and was an all-pro. So far this season, I mentioned the oblique, but he has posted each of the first 4 games. And on the Texans' top-heavy roster, Stingley and Collins are there at the very top with the pass rushers, Anderson and Hunter.
All right. I think while I'm certainly concerned about Stingley, I think the Ravens are going to try and get the ball out of Cooper Rush's hand very quickly in this game. So we'll see how that works out because they have to, because of the matchups at each pass rusher and each tackle potentially, who are Rosengarten is okay. Had a good game this last week. Noteboom happened to have a good game after Stanley left. Stanley had probably the worst game of his career for the 15 snaps he was in. So it was truly atrocious. Charlie, always a pleasure to just get to catch up with you, even for a few minutes, and reminisce a little and talk a little football. Do you want to tell folks anything you need to plug, or you want to tell people where they can talk football if they have a question on Twitter or anything?
At Pallilo, Pallilo on Twitter /X. So we're not going to devote any time to the Astros-Orioles American League Championship Series?
Well, oops. You can tell them about a frustrating year for both teams, obviously, particularly since the Astros actually were making a run at it for a while. But talk a little bit about maybe the work you do with the Astros show you do.
Yeah, the primary, it's called Stone Cold Strohs, the originator I work with, big wrestling guy, so the whole Steve Austin thing. So Stone Cold Strohs, YouTube, as I understand, it's the overwhelmingly choice for consumption, not because of my pretty face. It's just YouTube's taken more and more of the podcast space, but Spotify, Apple, all those sources. And we're actually on hiatus for business reasons with the Texans on Tap podcast that we've done. So we'll figure out whether that returns, or depending how the season goes, whether it warrants return for 2025. Could be our gap year on that one, Ken.
All right. Great talking to you again, Charlie. Other folks out there, thanks for listening as always. Please tell a friend about this. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe if you're listening there. And otherwise, we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.